Hello and welcome to episode 141 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And it's been a little while since we've recorded. Not a lot has gone on in the league. It's just been really quiet. We've been kind of focused on there's three Gallardo sports open now. The hockey league, the regular hockey league has been great. It's just the Dynasty League is taking a bit of a back seat, and hard to put us at fault for that.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of a lull at the end of the season in baseball. I think it's been a little longer than expected this season. I think for a lot of the reasons that you're saying, but yeah, it's kind of crazy to think how this has played out. But I know we're getting closer to the draft. We're getting, free agency is picking back up in baseball. So I am sure that, we're going to see some more activity in here. But until then, we will still have some podcasts. So cannot complain there.
Yeah, no, we definitely will. Speaking of Dynasty Gallardo football, Jamar Chase just had a 76-yard touchdown. Jake Browning is legit. And that is going to be very good for my team as I'm trying to get that last playoff spot here.
Yeah, I do not like that. Good things for you is not good.
Yeah, no, that's tight. We don't need to talk about that all, but basically it's most likely going to be me versus Erik for that final spot. A lot of fun here. There was one baseball transaction though that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I I thought that one of the players that you and I talk about a lot. If you search this name up in our Slack DMs, it probably has showed up like 1,000 times by now. And it's really the only significant transaction that's happened since the winter meetings has started. We're recording this on the Monday of the winter meetings. So other than Wade Miley's signing, which I guess is very significant for this particular group of people and not really significant for like the entire rest of the
Wait, I didn't even know Wade Miley signed. Where did he sign?
He re-signed with the Brewers.
I didn't hear that.
I
didn't hear anything
posted this
about that.
in baseball and also posted this in the Miley Club. Like
there's a lot
we
of
have a
things
Wade
that...
Miley Club. And you aren't aware of this. I am so disappointed in you. But yeah, Jarred Kelenic is a Brave. Kind of a weird trade. How does this make you feel about your boy?
Well, I think we can ignore the whole Mariners being weird aspect of it for a while, and let's just... I think it's a slightly better situation, if I had to say. He's going to have a shorter leash probably, or it's going to be... I think if he doesn't perform, then he'll probably be relegated to fourth outfielder more quickly than he would in Seattle. But also at the same time, he's got a starting left fielder job, at least tentatively, and he's going to be in a better lineup to drive in some runs, perhaps, to score some runs. His left field competition is Vaughn Grissom, who is not a left fielder and not good. So I'm not worried about that, at least for playing time to start the year. Obviously, if he doesn't perform, that's a different story. But yeah, I think this is, as a Kelenic owner, slightly better.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's going to bat lower in the lineup. So he'll probably bat ninth. But the lineup context around him, I think, will cancel that out. I mean, Michael Harris batted ninth for a good chunk of the season with Atlanta and was still plenty valuable in fantasy. So I don't have an issue from that perspective. I just think there's a decent chance he platoons. I mean, you might not think that Vaughn Grissom's a major league left fielder, but the Braves have already come out and said that between him and Kelenic, they think the left field situation's solved. I think there's a decent chance of a platoon. I think I was reading that Kelenic is a little better against lefties than he is righties. And I mean the Braves are still high on Grissom's bad. I think they're trying to find him a defensive home, and if they could stick him out in left field and make it work, I think they'll try to. And I feel like they've invested a little more in Kelenic, or sorry, in Grissom than they have Kelenic, having, developed Grissom. So I do think that Kelenic needed to change his scenery, and it just wasn't going to work in Seattle. And I think a lot of the pressure is off here because the rest of the lineup's going to be better. So I think there is a chance of some skills growth here, and Atlanta does a good job of developing players, but he still has a 30% K rate, and that's a number I have a hard time with. Seeing going down, and if that number keeps where it is, I just have a hard time seeing how he can be in a top tier dynasty asset. And I think he's off your roster by, I'm going to say, Memorial Day. I think you'll give him until Memorial Day, and then you're going to cut him, barring an injury that just lets you stash him on the IL. But knowing you'll have like 15 injuries by then, and he'll be one of your 7 bench IL players.
That's tough. I think there's still a path to him being like a Teoscar Hernandez type. I think that's certainly reasonable, and I think we have seen him hit at the major league level. It's just a matter of putting it all together more consistently, and I think this is somewhat of a make or break year for him. I probably said that last year, but this one feels more true this year. And yeah, I suppose we'll see.
We shall see. But yeah, I think this is a player you and I have disagreed with about for a long time, and I think we are going to continue to disagree about Kelenic until the end of time.
Perhaps. But yeah, speaking of players on the move, we haven't recapped the roster cut down. I'm looking at the list of guys right now. No one too surprising here. I waited until 3 minutes before the deadline to cut Willie Castro, but I did eventually cut Willie Castro. Unfortunately, were there any names that you found interesting? Here EBO cut Alex Lang, who's a guy who could be the Tigers closer to start the year. Other than that, though, anyone stand out to you?
How about Erik dropping Giancarlo Stanton?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. I just kind of looked right
now
past
realizing that. We had talked about that on the Cutdown episode as being a possibility. But I wasn't totally convinced that it was going to happen, just because he's been one of Erik's favorite players, and he drafted him in the first round of the inaugural draft. He traded him away, and then reacquired him half a season later. So he's always been one of Erik's guys, but I think he was right to cut bait on him. I think it was time. And probably a little bit overdue.
Yeah, I suppose we buried the lead here, huh? Yeah, he
kind of did.
Yeah, I suppose Erik does not have faith that he can hit 500 home runs by the end of his career. Yeah, no, he's a free agent. No one picked him up immediately after. So yeah, that's I guess a green square that's going to be gone from the sheet.
I already took it off the sheet. It's probably the right move. I mean, I think some of the players Erik kept, and let's pull up his team quickly. If you're kind of looking at the bottom of his roster, and some of the guys we talked about potentially being cuts, we talked Nelson Velasquez and Will Benson, and Luis Campusano. He kept some of these younger guys who have some upside, who, I mean, maybe the league as a whole, maybe if you pulled everybody, they're not oh my God, I love this guy. but they're interesting enough young guys to like some people where it's like, hey, like let's take a gamble on them and kind of see what happens, because sometimes that's how you find real breakouts, i.e., like me with TJ Friedel last year, right?
Yeah, I certainly think Will Benson's the better upside play than Stanton.
Yeah, I mean, Nelson Velasquez had 17 homers and 162 at bats last year. I mean, I don't know. That's a hard profile.
That's a Yeah, that's pretty good too. That's a tough guy to cut too. He took upside over guys like Stanton, and I think it's hard to blame him.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, I think that's the right way to go about it. If you're kind of looking at the fringes of your roster there. I think another thing too with Giancarlo is that he was only going to be DH eligible next year, I believe. And I mean, Erik already has Ohtani, who is also only DH eligible. So at some point, you want a little bit of that roster flexibility. I
Yeah,
wonder if Teoscar
exactly.
Hernandez is also going to be only util eligible next year if he played enough in the outfield. Uh, Interesting. He only DH 28 times. He played right field 135 times. I would have guessed those numbers were flipped. Um, but okay, I stand corrected. I wonder if here's the other one, Marcell Ozuna. I wonder if he even played the outfield last year. I'd be kind of shocked if he did. I mean, he played exactly 2 games in left field. So Erik would have had 3 util only players on his roster. Given that context, Giancarlo, it makes way more sense as a cut.
I agree. I hadn't considered that him and Ozuna would both be losing outfield eligibility. But yeah, it feels like the right move to cut Stanton, and I'm sure it was a really difficult one for Erik.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. No, I mean, God knows I probably have the hardest time of anyone in the league cutting my guys that I develop an emotional attachment to. So I certainly can imagine it would be difficult for Erik, but as an objective, or he has an outside perspective, it feels like the right move.
Yeah, meanwhile, there's like 8 players I think you should cut.
8 players I should cut.
Or there was pre Cutdown. You cut some of them.
You would not be cutting Kelenic right now.
Uh, I would have cut Kelenic at the Cutdown deadline for sure.
I don't know. Over who? And for what? To pick up who?
Let's see what's on your team. I don't even remember your cuts. You know what? We'll debate this one off air because we have a whole segment to get to.
We do. Do we want to get to the segment right now, or do you have anything else that you want to?
Uh, no, I don't think we have anything else. I mean, there hasn't even been like an ad or a drop. I will say I do think that uh the next couple of days are going to be really interesting, and I think that's going to start to shape the trade market. But with the winter meetings, but I think we're nearing a breaking point here. But no, I don't really have anything significant to add. Let's get to the segment.
All right, let's do it. So we have something fun planned here, an off-season segment. We've kind of been enjoying doing a lot of these drafts lately. So we've cooked up another one. I'm not sure if there's going to be a special name for it. We're calling it the Closers Draft. Basically, we are each taking, we're drafting 15 people, and we're trying to get the most saves over the next 5 years. So 24 through 28 seasons. Whoever's list of 15 players combines for the most saves is going to be our winner. This is one we're going to be keeping track of for a while. And I'm excited because it really feels like there's like 15 or so closers who are kind of like, yeah, I can count on this guy getting saves at least for the next few years. But after that, we really had to kind of dig. I think 15 was the perfect number per team, so 30 total. Kind of starting to dig and trying to find some deep sleepers or something.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was hard, and kind of balancing because it is a 5-year thing. Like, who do you want to take who's a closer now versus who do you want to take that might get the job eventually? So, yeah, definitely tried to figure that one out. But yeah, I am excited for this one. Do you want to dive right in here? I guess who had the first pick in our last uh draft?
I do not remember. Well,
I think it
let's
might have been
let's
you.
let's see. What was our last draft? It was the over 35 draft.
Yes.
Yes, I picked first and I took Paul Goldschmidt.
Paul Culture. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
All right. So you're going first, and are we going to snake it?
Yeah, we should snake it. God, this one's tough.
It is tough. I think there's a lot of guys you could take in the top few spots, and I wouldn't be surprised. And I also wouldn't be surprised if there's some name that's near the top of your list that it's just completely missing from mine that I forgot about.
Yeah. All right. I was debating a couple of names. I'm gonna go with my gut here. And my gut says Josh Hader. And the
Interesting.
reason I'm saying Josh Hader, I mean, there's a few reasons. I mean, he has been one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant closer over the last several seasons. Um, he's done a great job in multiple places, Milwaukee, San Diego, but he's a free agent right now. And I think that he is going to be able to kind of control where he goes and kind of make sure he gets that closer's job. He was only pitching in 1 inning stints last year. I think it's pretty set at this point that he's just going to be a closer. He's not going to be kind of like fireman type of role that he did have kind of back in his earlier Milwaukee days. And the reason why I picked him over some of the other people, especially the free agency context as well, is like, who knows if some of these other guys get traded who are under contract right now and maybe to get traded to another team with an elite closer and all of a sudden, they're just an eighth inning guy. We saw what happened when Craig Kimbrell got traded to the White Sox when they had Liam Hendricks. So it just, I felt a little more comfortable with this here, and I'm a big Hader fan. He's on my dynasty team, so and a former Oriole prospect, and hopefully a future Oriole.
Yeah, and I think that future Oriole thing is what scared me off a little bit from Hader. The thought that if he goes with the Orioles, is he going to be a setup man? They're starting in 2025 because there have been some rumors of him to the Orioles. That kind of scared me off of him. So I am going to take the guy who is number one on my board here. He's super young. He leads the majors in saves over the last 3 years. It's Emmanuel Clase.
That's a good one.
Just kind of looking the last 3 years, he's got 110 saves and an ERA sub 2. I feel like he doesn't get talked about a ton, but I think he's like the best closer in baseball. And I remember when he was just a prospect in this league, a starting pitching prospect for the Rangers, if you remember that.
And I traded him to Alex because I had him, and Alex insisted on a trade that got me Austin Meadows that I needed to include Emmanuel Clase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not a bad call on his part. So Emmanuel Clase, super young. I think he's going to be the top guy on this list over the next 5 years. And then the next choice is a little tougher. I think I am. God, it's the second pick in the draft, and it's already hard. Give me Camilo Doval. He had 39 saves this past year. It was really only his second full season. He had 27 the year before he kind of jumped into the role in the middle of 2022, and he's been fantastic ever since. He had a 2.93 ERA this year. I like the stuff.
Interesting. Okay, give me you made my picks a lot easier then. Give me Devin Williams.
Yeah, that was my next.
and then
choice.
give me Edwin Diaz. And I fully concede that there's a
Ooh.
risk with Edwin Diaz coming off of the injury, but it sounds like he's fully recovered. I think the Mets are going to run him out there. They paid him big money. It wasn't an arm injury. If it was an arm injury, that I think that might have scared me off, but it's not an arm injury. And then Williams has just been absolutely dominant. My one hesitation with Williams, because I considered him at one, is kind of the same reason I had a little bit of hesitation with Clase. Is I think one or both of those players is going to get traded. And again, I just worry about the possibility of like, hey, they're getting traded into a situation where they're not the guy. Where I think they should be the guy, but you never know how that works out. So
I think we're high enough on the board that these guys are going to be the guy anywhere they go.
I think you're probably right, but I mean, we've seen examples of that over the past couple of seasons where you would think somebody's going to be the guy and then they got traded. Remember Raisel Iglesias getting traded to the Braves?
It's true. And now he's the guy again.
Right. Yeah. Well, he ended up being the guy again. Craig Kimbrell got traded to the White Sox and he wasn't the guy for a little bit. Right. And then he kind of got the gig back. Andrew Miller, we all thought was going to be the guy. And then he signed with the Yankees, remember, and was their fireman type. And then he went to the Guardians and was a fireman type. So, you know, I think it's a combination of, you know, skill, but also a little bit of luck in terms of where they end up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I had Edwin Diaz a lot lower on my board. I think he's good, but also, you know, he's had ups and downs over his career. He's also older than some of these guys as well. I think we've kind of shown that you're a lot more comfortable taking some older guys than I am. Already in this early draft.
Older guys. I have not drafted a player over the age of 30. In fact, all three players I've drafted are 29.
That's true. I think, yeah, but I've taken a 25-year-old and a 25-year-old so far. So we've had slightly different strategies, I've noticed.
Okay. Fair point. All
and my next pick is, it's another 25-year-old. It's Yohan Duran.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, he's got a career 2.15 ERA in the majors. He had 27 saves this year, struck out 12 batters per 9 innings. I think he's going to be one of the best closers in baseball over the next 5 years.
All right, that's fair.
And I think it gets really tricky from here. I don't know if you agree.
Not really. But go ahead.
Interesting. There are a few names I'm between. I think he missed some time with injury last year. So his raw save numbers aren't quite as high. Don't want this guy. Okay, yeah, give me Ryan Helsley.
Ooh, interesting.
I like Ryan Helsley a lot. He's had a 1.25 ERA in 2022, with 13 strikeouts per 9. I had a little injury issues this past year, but still struck out a ton of guys and saved 14 games this year. I think he's going to be the guy going forward for a Cardinals team that has got to be better than it was this past year.
Interesting. You drafted a player that was not in my top 10.
Interesting. Well, Edwin Diaz was not in my top 10.
Okay, well, so my next two picks, who I thought you were going to take one or both of them, but I will happily take both. Alexis Diaz and Andres Munoz.
Yeah, those are both close.
Yeah, I mean, I think both younger guys. I think there's a little more volatility with both. Munoz in terms of perhaps the role, because the Mariners have a lot of other good relievers, but I do think he is the best of them. And I do think he eventually settles full-time in that closer's job. And then Diaz, just in terms of, I think as a pitcher, he's just a little more volatile, but I think he is by far the best relief option that the Reds have. I don't care for Emilio Pagan, and I think that Reds team is very good. So he racked up the saves this year. There's no reason to be he can't rack up the saves next year. I am all in on the Alexis Diaz and Andres Munoz hype trains.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg complains about Andres Munoz, but I think he's fantastic. He would have been one of my next picks.
Yeah.
I'm going to take another NL Central closer. I like David Bednar a lot.
That's a good pick. Yeah.
Yeah, he saved 39 games this past year. He had a 2.53 FIP. He does not give up many home runs at all. He's had 3 years in a row with less than 0.75 homers per 9. David Bednar, closer for the Pirates. And I, with my next pick, so that's 10 guys off the board now. Oof. There's a guy, and I'm sure you know who this is. There's a guy who's the best guy on here remaining, but he's going to, be at a bit of a disadvantage to start. So I think I'm not going to take him. I think I am going to take Jordan Romano instead.
Yeah.
He's had 2 years with 36 saves in a row. He's on a very good Blue Jays team that seems to want to go in big in free agency this year to some degree to kind of build around their core before the Red Sox get good again and before the Rays get good again or better again. I think he's a good closer. He was in the rotation for that Fisher Cats team I worked for. And Jordan Romano.
Good stuff. All right, you took some of the more interesting names that were left on the board that I really liked. Those were my next two.
Both of them?
Yeah.
All right, love to see it.
Yeah, you pitched my next two. So give me it's harder to predict saves the farther out we go because there can be a lot of randomness. So I'm gonna try and predict some earlier save opportunities here. And I'm gonna go give me Raisel Iglesias.
All right.
I know he is 33, but he is pitching for one of the best teams in baseball, and I haven't seen anything to suggest that he's fallen off. So I will happily take him. The next pick, it's a little tougher. I'm gonna go, and maybe this is a little, I wouldn't say off board for me, but you know what? I'm gonna go with it. Give me another closer on an elite team, and give me Jose Leclerc. I really liked how he ended the season this year. And he's pitching for a Texas team that just won the World Series. Aroldis Chapman's not going to be back. Will Smith is not going to be back. I think it's his job to lose. I think there is a risk that they bring in somebody, but if they don't bring in somebody, I think he's going to just run over the
Interesting pick. Yeah, I had him quite a bit lower on my board. Because I definitely find it far from a guarantee that he's going to be closing games by the end of next year.
Yeah, I'm now thinking about it. I'm regretting it because I wonder if they're the ones who signed Hader, but
honestly, that would be a great signing for them.
Oh, it would be. So yeah, maybe I messed that one up, but
that's okay. Maybe I took Ryan Helsley too early. Who's to say?
Yeah.
Although I think he'd certainly be off the board by now, so it's not like I took him way too early.
I stood several players above him for what it's worth.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, you took. I have several players above Jose Leclerc, so that's okay. I don't think there are a lot of sure things left, so I am going to take another closer who's on a good team. and try and rack up some saves this year, and maybe for 1 or 2 years. Ryan Presley is at 30 saves in back-to-back years. He's 34 now, so I'm not sure how much longer he's going to be the Astros closer. But we're at the point where, yeah, like you were saying, 1 or 2 years of guaranteed saves is what's going to win you this game. So Ryan Presley is my next pick. And I am going to, and this whole exercise has kind of made me realize that there aren't a lot of guys on my dynasty team who are kind of like saves guys that we're counting on. Maybe this is a need of mine because I'm taking Clay Holmes right now, and he's the first of my guys to come off the board. And Clay Holmes, he really struggled to start the 2023 season, and really to end 2022. But I got to give him credit. He really kind of figured it out again. Bounced back in a big way. He was terrific in September, had an 0.75 ERA down the stretch. So I don't know, I buy him as a guy who's going to make adjustments and be a good closer for the Yankees, at least for a little while.
Interesting. All right. At this point, give me Felix Bautista.
Yeah, I've been kind of dancing around him for a while.
Yeah, give me 4 years of him. I mean, there's always the kind of the injury risk there, but like I don't see a reason why Baltimore's not going to reinstall him as a closer. I mean, I do think I think Baltimore is more likely to sign a guy like Hector Neris this offseason than they are Josh Hader. I don't think they want to spend 75 million, 100 million on a reliever. And if I'm them, I don't want to do that either. I'd rather them invest that money into the rotation. I think they've done a good job of finding capable bullpen pieces, so that's kind of the least of my concern. So we'll do that. And then I'm gonna go Paul Sewald for the next pick.
Interesting. I left Paul Sewald off my board entirely. I don't know what to make of him going forward.
He's going to close for a team that just made it to the World Series. He's been a closer for several years before this. And even if he becomes a free agent after the season and doesn't re-sign with Arizona, I think he has enough pedigree as a closer at this point where teams are going to want to just sign him as a closer. I mean, I think there's a possibility he signs to be a setup man somewhere where there's already a better closer, but I could also see one of those scenarios where, like, you know, he signs for like a mediocre team to be their closer on like a pretty reasonable contract. I don't know if he's going to be closing all 5 of the next 5 years, but at this point of the draft, I don't think we're really looking at guys who we expect to be closing all 5 in the next 5 years. I think we're hoping for like 3 years.
I think that's certainly fair. I think we're starting to get to guys that are reaches. At this point, I'm going to take Adbert Alzolay because I like what I saw from him this past year. I think he's kind of got the Cubs closer spot down at least for another year. The Cubs want to compete. I think they like him as their closer. He's another guy who was a starting pitching prospect in this league, and now he's closing for a team. So let's go Adbert Alzolay. And
I'm not convinced he has the job on opening day. I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and kind of like we're talking about like Texas with Josh Hader, like they go out and make kind of like a big bullpen splash.
Fair enough. And I think I'm going to how many guys have we each taken? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so we've got 6 more guys each. Let's go Pete Fairbanks, closer on a good team. Again, the Rays are weird with closers, with relievers. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but he got a decent number of saves this year. I think at the very least, the last couple of years, they've kind of been more solid closer than they have in previous years. He got 25 saves this year. I don't see any reason to take him out of that closer role. I like his rates. I like his periffs. He walks a few too many guys for my liking, but we're kind of, we've taken 19 closers collectively now.
Interesting. Okay. Kind of going off of your picks here. What you said, I'm already forgetting. Who was the second one after Alzolay?
Pete Fairbanks.
Right. Kind of going off one of your younger picks here. I'm gonna I got two guys I really like here. One of them's a younger guy, one of them's an older guy. I'll go with the older guy first, Robert Suarez. The Padres signed him to a massive 5-year deal last offseason. And I think that he is going to get the first shot at being a closer. He came back and he was a setup guy. I know that Padre team without Hader, without Snell, without Soto, presumably if he leaves, is probably going to be a little bit worse. But I still think they're going to be an above average team with, Tatis and Machado and, Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, some of the other guys that they got. So I think he has the opportunity to rack up saves for a couple of years, and that contract I think is going to afford him some time there. The other one, speaking of starting pitchers turning into relievers, how about Mason Miller? I think,
Interesting.
yeah, I saw something earlier today that was like the A's are thinking about this season just moving Miller to the bullpen, and what his whole everything about him screams future closer to me. I think his body's going to break down if they force him to throw too many innings, but the stuff is electric. I know that Oakland is not a particularly good team, but I do think that Miller, unlike some of the more recent names I picked, might have more of a longevity component to him, where I think he could realistically be closing for each of the next 5 years because of his age. And maybe he just ends up being more of a stopper than an outright closer. But this is one of the younger starting pitchers that I really wanted to take my shot at, saying he's going to be a closer.
All right. This is the part of the draft I was excited for, because we've reached the point where, was he the first guy off the board who's not first in line to be closer this fall or this spring?
I mean, if you're assuming that the Rangers and Padres aren't going to sign someone ahead of Leclerc and Suarez, and yes, he is the first.
And let's take another, with my second pick, another guy who's kind of been a recent convert out of the rotation, AJ Puck. I think he's going to be the closer in Miami at some point. He got a little bit of action this year. He had a solid season in the bullpen. Former top name. I remember in like 2016 or whatever, or 2017, kind of seeing buzz at him as the number one overall pick. So that's obviously he got picked like a mid to late first rounder. Came up as a starter, but now he's been in the bullpen with Miami, and I think he will get the Miami closer's job at some point in the next 5 years.
Oh, I disagree with that. So the Gratterall pick, I like Gratterall to pitcher, but I am worried with that K rate that they're not really going to ever commit to giving him that job. Plus,
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Plus,
that's the big
Kenley left. Like, it seems like they haven't really settled on one closer other than that 1 year they had Kimbrel, but Kimbrel wasn't even really particularly good. And then AJ Puck had the chance this year, and I'm pretty sure he was a closer for a little bit and then lost it. And as a matter of fact, just to kind of prove a point here, I'm going to draft a guy who did end the year as the Miami closer, and that's Tanner Scott.
I like that pick. He was actually next on my board.
Yeah, I know he didn't look as good in previous years. Something kind of clicked this year. He's still relatively young. He's 29. Will definitely start the year as the closer. Unlike some of these other teams we're talking about with not super established closers, I don't think that Miami's going to go out and splurge on a big name closer. I think that they're more likely to spend their money getting a bat. So I feel pretty confident that he'll start the year as a closer, but I also think this is one of those situations where either he has legitimately turned a quarter and Tanner Scott's going to close for the next 3 years, or he gets replaced by June because the walk rate skyrockets and he's just not effective. But it seemed like he, if I remember correctly, exhibited a lot better control last year. And I wonder if this is he cut his walk rate in over a half. It was insane. His home run rate got cut in half, and I don't know if that's necessarily super sustainable, although Miami is a great place to pitch. but the walk rate being cut in half is really encouraging. He did that over a career high in innings 78, and if he can keep that up, then there's a reason to be he can't be a top flight closer. And then my next pick. See, how many more closers do we have? Okay.
I think we've each got 3 more.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna go a little boring here, and I'm gonna take Kenley Jansen. I mean, he's 20 or not 26. He's 36 right now. I know he's gonna close for Boston next year. I'm reasonably confident that a team is gonna sign him to close for another year or two after that. And like, yeah, it's boring, but like I know what I'm gonna get from him at this point. And if I can get 3 years of him closing at this point in the draft, great. And who knows, maybe he sticks around for like 4 or 5 more years. I mean, I get that we've talked about age with some of these relievers a little bit, but also some of these relievers kind of pitch forever. So, especially some of these ones who are like top flight closers, I think they get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt at times, and teams just keep signing them because of that experience.
I mean, hey, that's fair. Kenley is number 2 in saves over the last 5 years and number 1 over the previous 5 years. So he's certainly been saving games for a long time. Yep. Not a bad pick at all. Let's get out there. I think someone's going to sign Bob Steve to be their closer this year. I think the Rays figured something out with him.
That's a great pick. I had him on my board. My concern with him is I don't know if he's necessarily going to sign to be a closer. I thought there's a reasonable chance he could sign and be a setup man. That was my only beef. But from a skills perspective, he makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, they figured something out for sure. He's got some great pitches. And speaking of, I've got 2 picks left. And I'm going to take my 2 super off-board guys with them. Let's go Johan Oviedo. He's currently a starting pitcher. He's got a fantastic slider and a good fastball, and he primarily throws those 2 pitches. I think at some point he kind of cuts aside the secondary pitches. He doesn't really pitch well later in games. However, he gets better in higher leverage situations. So I think, he's got the makings of a closer. He's going to be a closer someday.
Are you aware that he is out for the year next year?
Yeah, I don't care. I don't think he was going to be a closer this year, regardless of. Honestly, I think him being out this year kind of increases the odds of him coming back in the bullpen when he comes back.
Interesting. Okay. That was not who I expected you to say when you said that you were going to go off board.
I'm going super off board. My next pick is going to be even more off board.
Interesting. Okay.
He's currently on the same team as a guy I've already taken.
All right.
I guess so is Oviedo. But
I'm debating 4 names here for my last 2 spots. I feel very confident about one of them I want to pick.
No, the guy I'm taking is not on the board. That's okay.
I'm going to go with the first pick. I'm going to go with Abner Uribe.
Okay.
He's the Brewers reliever. He's somebody I'm very high on. I think he is the Devin Williams replacement as soon as this year when they trade him. This kind of gives me vibes of when like Williams kind of came out of nowhere, became that elite setup guy, and then when Hader got traded, Williams just took over. I think Uribe could easily be that guy, and he's going to be cheap. So and if it looks like the Brewers are going to go into a bit of a retool, I don't think they're really going to be signing some guy that's going to take over the spot. The second guy gets a little more difficult. If I'm going to put all my eggs in a Felix Bautista basket, I don't really feel like picking DL Hall, but he's somebody I was considering. So I'm going to go with Ryan Kerkering. And I think, honestly, this is just an excuse for me to talk about how much I like Ryan Kerkering, but he came on at the end of the year. I think he started the year like single A, jumped all the way up to the majors, pitched very well to end the season, pitched very well early into playoffs. He had a couple of blow-up outings. I think they were both against the Diamondbacks. And when I say blow-up, it was like, didn't like give him up like 6 earned or anything, but he definitely wasn't as sharp, gave up a couple runs. I the risk here is that Philly is a team that goes out and signs somebody like a Josh Hader. Although I feel like at some point, like how much money do they actually have? I think the Aaron Nola signing kind of decreases the chances they go after somebody like him. I wonder if they go after somebody a little cheaper, like a Bob Steve or a Jordan Hicks instead. But I think Kerkering, like I like some of the other relievers that they have, namely Jose Alvarado, I believe was the one with a really good year last year. And he's still kind of youngish. I mean, he's 28, but I mean, I do think that like Kerkering has like very much has closer high end closer upside, and kind of at this point of the draft, that's the type of player I want to gamble on. I guess Alvarado is under contract through 2025 with a 2026 club option. Although they didn't really commit to him this year as a closer. They only gave him 10 saves. So who knows? Maybe they're more interested in seeing him as a fireman. And honestly, I think as a whole, that's one of the tougher things about modern day baseball and doing this exercise. If we did this draft 10 years ago, I think it would be a lot easier. Now, like, we can think a guy is the best reliever on the team, and they might just not want him to be the closer. So, like, who knows?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It gets really tricky really quickly. I agree.
Right.
Um,
It wouldn't surprise me if in 5 years, like Uribe and Kerkering are two of the top five relievers in the league, hypothetically, but neither of them are getting saves or like consistent saves. Like maybe they're getting like 10 or 15 a year, but they're not getting like 30, 35.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, interesting. You like Uribe better than Joel Payamps, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I'm just kind of all in on the Uribe train. I kind of fell in love with him this year, but I wonder if Piems just kind of came out of nowhere a little bit too much for me to where he's just not gonna beat a guy. I don't know. The team control situation for him too. I'm not like I know he has a couple more years, but let's see. He's not a free agent until 27. I It's close. I wasn't even thinking about Joel Piems, but see their numbers kind of comparison. Your Uribe, I think, is a more dominant pitcher. The issue is that he has a little bit of a walk issue, but I do think Uribe is just a little more dominant. I don't know. It's tough. And that's
Yeah,
also what makes this exercise tough, right? Is it's like, hey, you think this guy's going to come up through the minors? He looks like a future closer, all that. And all of a sudden, you get a 29-year-old journeyman in there and he looks really good.
yeah, no, fair enough. Um, all right. My final pick, way off board. How about Michael Grove? Michael Grove came up as a starting pitcher for the Dodgers this year, but they're obviously not going to have any spot in the rotation for him coming forward. They've already kind of moved him to the bullpen towards the end of the year. His ERA was about 2.5 runs lower in the bullpen than it was in the rotation. And it's pretty clear. You can see after the first time through the order, he completely falls apart. And his slider is really good. He has a 44% whiff rate on the slider. That is 12th among all sliders in the league with as many sliders. Actually, no, it's 11th among people who have thrown as many sliders as he has. He gets a lot of strikeouts with the slider. He's got a couple pitches that he can easily just kind of discard if he wants to become a 2 or 3 pitch reliever. I think this is kind of a closer's makeup. A guy who's maybe not cutting it as a starter, but has one really solid put away pitch. So I'm gonna, take a gamble on Michael Grove.
I think it's a solid gamble. Yeah, I mean, definitely think he could easily beat a closer there. I think I agree. I'm not sure he ends up really being a serious rotation piece for them. I think there's enough young pitchers that they have ahead of them, and plus it's the Dodgers, will inevitably sign some guys. So I'm not totally convinced. that he'll be their next big rotation piece. But as a closer, I like that as a good sleeper pick.
Yeah, and I think you know, he's not it doesn't even necessarily have to be for the Dodgers. They could always put him in a trade somewhere and he goes off to Kansas City and becomes their closer.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun. I do have a couple of questions based off of this list. Who that you drafted in your last five do you think is most likely to lead the league in saves over the next 5 years? If you can only pick one player.
I can only pick one player. I'm going to take Gratterall out of that because um, he's second in line for closer on a team that wins 100 games every year. And he's like 23. So I think Gratterall could very easily be number one on this list by the end.
I'm gonna go really hot takey for mine, and I'm gonna say it's Kenley. I'm just he'll keep rolling. Like even give him 4 more years. Just why not?
Interesting. Do you think Kenley's a Hall of Famer?
Uh, I mean, I don't know what his playoff numbers are off the top of my head because I think for a closer, I think that matters a little more. Just because of the relatively few innings that you have, in in a given season to pitch.
I think that's fair, and coming from a Jonathan Papelbon is way better than we remember truther. So that's
Yeah. I'd also be curious to see what is so he is 14 on the relief pitcher. Hold on, let me see if I sort those right. No, he is research if you're sorting them by Jaws leaders on the relief pitcher Jaws leaders, which Jaws is a Jaffe War score system that Baseball Reference uses to measure a player's Hall of Fame worthiness. He is the 64th reliever currently, and there's quite a few names that are ahead of him that
okay.
Definitely.
Me and Jake met Jay Jaffe at a Fangraphs event. Fun fact.
Oh shit, I like that. If you're doing best seven WAR, like his WAR in his best 7 seasons, that number goes down to 85.
Okay, so it sounds like he is not a Hall of Famer. However,
those are the only two active players he's below. But yeah, I don't know if he's going to quite make that. Where I would be curious to see. So on the saves leaderboard, he is seventh all time, and as long as he gets 5 saves this year, he's going to be in the top 5. He'll pass Billy Wagner and John Franco. The only 4 ahead of him would be Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, Lee Smith, all 3 of whom are in the Hall of Fame, and then Francisco Rodriguez, who he should presumably pass next year. Because K-Rod has 437, so Kenley just needs 18 saves to pass him. And Kenley would do that in by far the fewest innings of these relievers. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's an interesting thing for sure.
Yeah.
And if you're picking him to get, say, another 100 saves over the next 5 years, then he's gonna be like in the top 2 or 3.
He'd be third all time. If he gets 100 saves, I think you have a hard time keeping him out. But see, he has a 2.52 ERA. That's lower than Trevor Hoffman's. If he gets 100 more saves, that's 81 less than Hoffman.
Interesting. Yeah. So you say, yeah, the fewer innings thing, and maybe that's part of the him not racking up WAR. We'll see. He's an interesting case. I think he's probably not, and I think he's probably not going to rack up a ton of saves over the next 5 years. That's why he was taken in the 13th round instead of the second round. But
if he could somehow get to 600, I think he makes it. That would require 180 saves. So if he can,
I think that's like, I think that's less likely than Giancarlo Stanton hitting 500 home runs.
What if he gets 150 more? What if he ends up at 570?
No, that's a little more plausible. I think I'd have to see what if he's doing that with a 4 ERA over the next few years, then that's a lot different than keeping up his 2 4 career year or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I do think he almost hit kind of a career crossroads there a couple of years ago and reinvented himself a little bit. Like I think he's kind of gotten back to where he was, but we'll see. Um, any honorable mentions that were on your list that we did not talk about that you would like to throw out?
Yeah, I think just to name a few, Hector Neris has a chance of being a closer somewhere next year. Alex Lang is going to rack up some saves for the Tigers. James MacArthur was almost a hot take of mine. I also, and as for a very hot take, I'm maybe the Rangers want to keep John Gray in the bullpen. He pitched in the bullpen during the playoffs. Maybe they decide that he's a bullpen guy. So he could have been one of my late picks as well, as like a really hot take.
Interesting. Okay.
The next Drew Pomeranz or something.
We all know how that turned out for Drew Pomeranz over the long haul. Okay, I'm trying to think what other sleepers I had, or other ones. I mean, I mentioned DL Hall. I had Yennier Cano on the list. I don't think the Orioles intend on having him close next year. I think it would rather. I think he suffers from the same problem that Bruiser Gratterall does, where he isn't really a dominant reliever. Like he doesn't rack up a ton of strikeouts, and I think the Orioles like him better as an eighth inning guy than they do in the closer spot. But I think there's still a decent chance he closes next year. I'm surprised neither of us mentioned Ben Joyce, the Angels reliever. Was it Tennessee, I think he was drafted out of, where he like had the like ridiculous
Yeah, he throws 105 or something.
Yeah, he came up this year. He wasn't as like super great in the majors. I worry that he just throws a really fast fastball and that's like kind of it. Like there's not really much else to his game. And I wonder if over time he's not going to be super effective. But who knows? I'm a little surprised that neither of us picked like, I mean, I guess I did with Mason Miller, but like somebody who is a current starting pitcher prospect.
I think Michael Grove sort of qualifies.
I take that back. Grove qualified. Okay, so I took Grove, or sorry, you took Grove. I took Mason Miller. I thought maybe we each would have picked one more. Oh no,
I had Brandon Pfaadt on my board.
You had who? Brandon.
I had Brandon Pfaadt on my board.
I see. I think he's going to be a starter. He's not the one of those like young pitchers that they have that I think could do that. I mean, just kind of like thinking of names quickly, like who will qualify there. I mean, not only do I have to think of them, but then it's got to be like, hey, like, does their team have space for them to kind of be that guy? Maybe one under the radar guy for that could be Daniel Espino. I wouldn't have picked him for this draft because he's not even going to be in the majors next year. And I think he has a decent road to get up there, but it's clear he can't stay healthy. And I wonder if moving him to the bullpen could help with that. And the Guardians do a really good job of developing pitchers. So there's one thought there. Saw an article today that said Jarred Kelly, the White Sox, could be a guy. I don't know how I feel about that. I will say one last name, and then I'll let you kind of run off any other names you might have. One player that I almost said is a really hot take last pick, even though it makes no sense, was Shohei.
Okay.
Although I have no clue how it would work if he had the bat in the eighth and then pitch in the ninth, but that was kind of my hot take. Like, hey, maybe if with the arm injuries, he kind of has to slow down on the pitching, but they still want to use him. Like, there could be instances where he closes.
I mean, I think that would certainly be a ton of fun.
Oh, it'd be a blast. But yeah, I don't. I guess that there's a game where he's like batted in the seventh, like the end to end of seventh. So he's not really slated to bat in the eighth. And if he does end up being slated to bat in the eighth, that means they've batted around and like they're not going to need him to pitch. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting thought experiment to see if a two-way player could be a closer. So I do enjoy that. The only other names, I was like, hey, maybe Jamison Tyone is the next guy that moves into the bullpen. That's not based on anything. Just he's just kind of a name who's been kind of a mediocre starting pitcher for a little while. Maybe he becomes a shutdown reliever based off of nothing. And then Gregory Santos. I still don't dislike Gregory Santos, even though I did cut him at the roster cut down deadline. I still think he has potential to be the White Sox closer. Um, and yeah, the only other name on my board that I didn't mention was Nate Pearson.
Well, one last name I'll throw out there is Jordan Hicks. Uh, I wouldn't be surprised if some team signs him to be a closer this offseason.
Yeah,
So
no, fair enough. But yeah, the thing about this, and if this podcast and this league is still going in 5 years, we're certainly going to look back on this then, because it really is hard to predict. It's an incredibly hard thing to predict. So for example, let's look back at the previous 5 years, 2019 to 2023, in terms of saves. So let me. I should have had it pulled up ready. Okay, so number one in terms of saves was Josh Hader over those 5 years. And I don't think he's a guy that he would have maybe been a sleeper at the end of 2018, but he wasn't much of a closer until 2019. He was kind of in a bit of a fireman role in 2018.
I think he certainly
Let's
would have been picked in the draft, but I don't think he would have been a high pick. Like, 'cause it was such a dominant year.
It was, yeah, it was a fantastic year. God, 15.8 Ks per nine, but yeah, only 12 saves. I think we would have taken him at some point, but I don't know. There was kind of thought that he was like the next Chris Davinsky. I remember thinking he was Chris Davinsky, but better. Which I mean, Chris Davinsky was never a closer. But Chris Davinsky was great for a couple of years. But yeah, so Hader was number one. He would have been maybe a mid to late round sleeper pick. Number two was Kenley. Kenley probably would have been the first pick overall. Number three was Rizal Iglesias. Rizal Iglesias was coming off of he was very recently moved out of the rotation. He was coming off of a very solid season, although with a pretty high FIP. He had saved 28 and 30 games over the last 2 years. So he would have been a decently high pick, but maybe not one of the top picks necessarily. Then pick number four, Liam Hendriks, would have been completely left off all of our boards, completely left out of any sort of analysis. He had one career save to that point. He was kind of a failed starter, had been a mediocre bullpen guy for a few years, and then just kind of became the best closer on earth for a couple of years. So very, very shocking. He would not have been someone we would have mentioned. And then number five was Emmanuel Clase. So Clase, this time,
Well,
5 years ago.
Passe was someone they traded to Alex before the 2020 season to go and get Austin Meadows. Alex insisted on getting him. I had picked him up as a free agent because I was kind of interested in him potentially as a closer. But like going into the 2019 season, I think there was awareness perhaps of who he was, but maybe of not how dominant he could potentially be as a closer. And that's kind of where I think you're looking at our picks here, like Orion Kerkering and Abner Uribe and Michael Grove, and you're thinking, hey, that's could be Emmanuel Cost, like
these are all guys that had debuted at that point. Clase had not yet debuted at the end of 2018. In 2019, he only got one save. So really, it was still he did not get any real closer until 2021. So he would have been, let's see, at the end of 2018, he was coming off of a really solid season out of the bullpen for Texas, to be fair, but it was only in 28 innings. So I'm really not sure how on anyone's minds he was at that point, and certainly took a few years to pan out. Yeah, so I think it's safe to say 4 and 5 would not have been on him, and Hendricks would not have been on our boards. So yeah, just kind of crazy. We are going to be very, very wrong about this when it's in 5 years from now, and it turns out some guy who's like currently the Yankees setup man turns out to save 120 games over the next 5 years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is undoubtedly going to happen. Uh, crazy, but
All right. But yeah, so that was our saves game. Anything else you want to talk about here before we call it a night?
I'm glad we didn't do a holds version of this because that would have been an absolute shit show.
Oh God, yeah. Who on earth? Well, let's see who has led the league in holds over the past 5 years. Do you have any guesses? From
Uh,
2019 to 2023.
if you would have asked me this question like 3 years ago, I would have said it was Andrew Miller. If you're asking me this question now, I'm trying to think who's just been like a consistent setup guy for a team for like years on end. If Devin Williams wasn't closing the lot, you know what? No, because he kind of came up in 20. He didn't really pitch in 19. I'm sure Devin Williams is high-ish on the list, but not like high. I'm gonna say
Devin Williams is 13th.
I'm gonna say Hector Neris.
Hector Neris is 9th.
Okay. Let me see. I don't think it's Giovanni Gallegos because he had
He's 6th.
6. Okay.
So you're getting warmer.
Yeah, let me see if I could just kind of quickly think through names of players on teams. Kind of go team by team here. I don't think anybody in the Orioles. I feel like Chris Martin might have led the league in holds this year. It came close to it, but I don't know over a 5-year span. I don't think he would have. Tampa's too weird. I don't think Toronto had anybody. Oh, who's set up for the Guardians? Not Karinchak, but they had another guy who's kind of interesting for a little while. But I don't know if it was a long enough time period. And I'm also blanking on the guy's name. Detroit didn't have anybody. Kansas City didn't have anybody. Who are the other teams in that division? I don't think Aaron Bummer's number one or anything. I think Aaron Bummer's like somewhat high on that list.
Aaron Bummer is 7th.
Okay, yeah. I can't think of anybody. The Angels, the Mariners, like Andres Munoz hasn't been on that team long enough. Otherwise, I would have guessed him. I'm guessing he's like top 30, but
Andres Munoz is not in the top 30.
okay.
Number 30 is Scott Barlow, if that kind of sets your expectations.
That kind of does. AJ Minter.
He's number 2.
Okay.
With 88 holds over the last 5 years, 2 behind our leader.
See, okay, so not a Pirate. I don't think it's a Cardinal. I doubt it's Helsley if it's not Gallegos. I feel like there's a logical Dodger pick. I don't think it's Bruiser Gratterall. I'm trying to think who's been there for a while for them. I don't think it's like Alex Vesia. I don't think he's been there long enough. I'm trying to think like, okay, teams who had like a straight path to the bullpen. The Orioles did for years, but not by this time. Why do I feel like the Yankees had somebody else? It's not Zach Britton.
No.
I'm guessing it's not like Jordan Hicks. Trevor May?
Not Trevor May. Trevor May is down at 28.
Okay.
Which feels lower than I would have thought, to be honest.
Yeah, trying to think of guys who are just fucking ancient and been around forever. Trying to think even who were some of our elite hold, like the elite hold. Oh, Blake Trinan maybe.
No, not Blake Trinan. He is not in the top 30.
I guess he kind of closed for too long. Also got hurt. Give me a hint.
He spent his entire time in this time frame with one team.
I feel like there has to be another Astro I'm missing. It's not Brian Abreu. Not Chris Davinsky.
No.
Is it an Astro?
It is not an Astro.
Okay. It would make sense that he spent his entire time for one team.
Numbers 3, 4, and 5 have bounced around a lot, though.
I don't think the Nationals have had a guy for that long. Or Miami. I give up, and a Zoom call is going to end in 3 minutes, so I give up.
All right, it was Tyler Rogers.
I would not have gotten him.
Yeah, Rogers is 1, Minter is 2, and then rounding out the top 5 are Adam Ottavino, Jake Diekman, and Andrew Chafin.
Ottavino is somebody I'm surprised I didn't think of. I don't think Jake Diekman kind of too. Who'd you say last? Oh, Andrew Chafin. I don't think I would have thought of Andrew Chafin.
Yeah. But yeah, those are that's just another reason we are not doing a holds version of this. Although I love streaming holds guys, I could never predict hold guys more than one day in the future, let alone 5 years.
No, and then every time I keep him, I'm like, this is going to be the guy, and then it never, like for next year, and then something happens. It always happens.
Yeah.
I've learned just to hold on to my saves guys and go from there. Although then they get hurt. Rip Felix Bautista. All right, anything else before we wrap up here?
No, that was it. Thank you all for listening. And it most likely will not be as long before our next episode. We're trying to do awards soon. Sahil, have you voted?
I'll do that tonight.
All right, you've been saying that for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, hopefully we can discuss the awards sometime and also like make some damn moves, please. Like, give us something to talk about.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week for another episode. Talk later.
Talk later.
This podcast is good.